Chapter 3. Establishing a centre. One of the things I learned when I first came to Britain was that if a person wanted to do something worthwhile in his or her life, laziness and inertia should have no place in that person's life. I push the boundaries all the time. Even now, as I approach my 73rd birthday, I don't want to sit back. People are wanting me to slow down, and I see the funny side of it. But I could never say to myself, now look, you're growing old, you don't need to bother. I would never do it because I have Shakti in my body. I have power. I might think of putting my feet up for a while, but no sooner have I done that than something will require my attention. Swami Govinda will suddenly appear and tell me that Swami Suryananda is on his way over to go through the accounts. So I'm quickly back up on my feet, preparing my accounts to have them ready. This is because I have a duty, and that duty is part of my life. I have a duty to serve everybody, a duty to work out every single little thing according to the law. God's law doesn't comprise of some hypothetical nonsense. You have to obey the law of the country and the law of God, and you must uphold everything in a truthful manner. To establish a spiritual centre meant I had to be disciplined. I had to bring a lot of discipline into my life because it literally meant working round the clock. In those early days, when I was living in London, that meant going to theatres, meeting people, seeing people, teaching people, helping and giving guidance to people. It wasn't an easy task. Those first 30 or so years of my work here in Britain were very difficult, including coming to Skanda Vale. Nothing was easy. Everything was traumatic because it had to be worked out from scratch, and it couldn't have come about without discipline. Occasionally, people would put a spoke in the wheel of progress, but I was never unhappy about that. Thank God, He has given me great power and resilience. Nobody can hold me back in my thoughts of spirituality and what I want to achieve for the well-being of humanity. I'm willing to take anybody on, and that has been my way all down the line. Right from the moment I started my work with complete and utter devotion to God, bringing people together and showing them what Satyam, Dharma, Prema and Shanti means. Satyam, absolute truth, must be there embodied in the human being fearlessly. Dharma, whatever Dharma the human being is following, whether it is Christian, Hindu, Muslim, Zoroastrian, Jewish, Buddhist, whatever, that faith must be helped to flourish. When somebody tells me that a person is of a particular religious belief, it's totally meaningless to me, because in my mind, it is the same. It is about God. So I never get involved trying to sort out that which separates them and me, or that which separates others from themselves. There is a common denominator that binds us in that spiritual context, and that common denominator is love, divine love, prema, and with it, truth, peace of mind, shanti. These principles will only come if people exercise the control of their sense organs and learn to surrender themselves at the lotus feet of the Lord. I have met many people from various religious organizations, and what I find missing is an absolute conviction and surrender to God, free from any qualification that some luxury or other is necessary before they can accept God. I abhor that, and I see how futile it is. That first you go to God saying, please God, I need your material protection. Look after me and I will love you. It's unfortunate, but that is what many organizations are doing today. And because of that, they're charging money. God is not with them, therefore. They won't personally experience God purely and simply because they are putting material gain first. If you really are dedicated to God, then you will never worry about your tomorrow. It is the insecurity of a monk that makes him a better monk. If there is so much security inside yourself, then you won't come close to God. Yet when I have visited some monasteries, I have seen how they are indulging in material wealth. They have to have television. They have to have their drinks. They're eating meat, you name it. They've got it in their monasteries. And in order to do these things and live in the luxury that they have, they're charging people. We don't have that in Skanda Vale. In order to establish a centre such as ours, we have given up a lot. This was important because people here in the Western world are so full of material wealth and possession. So, to bring to people the consciousness of a simple life, we ourselves have given up all such luxuries. The hallmark of Skanda Vale is simplicity. It is austerity. And through that austerity we can discover, in the silence of our own thoughts, God. That is the hallmark of our work here, bringing more people to the consciousness of the sacredness of life. Whilst the world outside is violent, whilst the world outside is waiting to pick people's pockets, we have freed ourselves with the grace of God to realize God within ourselves here. Whilst there are so-called spiritual organizations telling people how they need money to run their establishment, we do not. We don't think like that. It is alien to our way of thinking. What we need is the presence of God. And the presence of God is wealth and prosperity. The presence of God is security, true security, not financial security. The presence of God is food, clothing, and shelter. The presence of God is caring and loving. So you have no way of worrying or doubting about tomorrow. In my mind, therefore, our tomorrow is in the hands of the Lord I know, the Lord I talk to, the Lord I worship. This is what I am instilling into the minds of the monks and nuns, that their tomorrow can only be secure by constant vigilance, devotion, and love of God. When I began laying the foundations of a community long ago, I did everything possible to bring it about. I never looked for handouts. Every hour I could spend, every minute I could spend, was to find some way how I could work and earn a living to feed and care for people. And whilst I had in my mind that I wanted a community, I was never presumptuous to think that I should tell God what sort of community. I always believed that the work had to be from my side, and the blessings and direction will be from His. And I still think the same. People would ask me, how big is the community going to be? How many monks and nuns are you going to have? What's your goal? My goal is the consciousness of God for all people, and not just consciousness alone, but the experience of God. I listen to people talking about their belief in God, but this does not exist in my vocabulary. God is real. God is an experience. God is not a figment of the imagination. For the future, I want people to come to Skanda Vale without preconditions. I want them to come surrendering themselves to the Lord, to the Divine Mother, and offering themselves so she may use them to glorify her work on this planet. If people come saying, "Here I am, God, now please do this for me because I believe it is in the community's interest," well, they can say that, but God doesn't have to agree. For a community such as Skanda Vale to exist requires great patience and time. Fortunately, I have got the vision and perception necessary not only of the present, but also of the past. I've gone through many cycles of births and deaths, and it didn't happen overnight. This consciousness developed through time, and now I have reached this point. Why should I change it except to be even more conscious and cautious, not to say to myself, "I am the person who is doing the job. I am the person who is formulating the policy for the future. I am only the worker, the instrument. The motivator is the divine. If we do not utilize the resources that the Lord has provided for us, then He cannot motivate us within to progress spiritually. Materially, it is only because we are willing to surrender ourselves and be used to perform the duties that are required for the world that ultimately all spiritual centers will be a success. Giving a correct name to our community was very important because I wanted it to convey all that we aspired towards. One evening, and this was when I was still living in London, I was having a long discussion with my business partner Joe and our friend and collaborator, the Reverend James Keeler, who was by then the moderator of the Free Church and a most willing and valuable supporter in all we were trying to establish. Ideas were being tossed about, but nothing was forthcoming. So finally I said to them, "Would you give me some time on this? I want to go and sit down in my shrine and talk to the Lord." This I did, and when I asked for the Lord's guidance, He responded telling me, "All names are my names. All forms are my forms. Why don't you call it the community of the many names of God?" I think this is very important to mention. It was not James, Joe, or I who thought up the name. It was the Lord Himself who provided it. And the name was very relevant to the structure that He wanted. It encapsulated all that we were seeking to establish. It was the same when He appeared before me many years later with instructions to build the Sri Ranganatha temple. He told me, "The form must be surrounded by all the manifestations that link me with humanity." This link that I have forged with God and how I do nothing without His consent cannot be stressed enough. I would even say that it is the most important theme of this autobiography. The authority of God, the direction provided by God, and the resources to bring about all that He tells me to do. From when I was aged 9, everything has been choreographed by the divine. Everything has been followed through with the support and direction that is necessary to fulfill what the Lord wants me to do. When I say such things, I can see people thinking I have an overactive imagination. I don't. I don't like imagining anything. I don't want anybody to imagine anything. To simply imagine without obeying the will of God would not have brought about Skanda Vale. It would all have fallen flat. And it is a telling factor if a human being has no personal relationship with God. Without a personal commitment to God, how can you come to know God? It is the lack of interaction with God that prevents people from surrendering to God. Surrender, though, is the hallmark of spirituality. Yet it is fear that stops people from surrendering because they grab the world and are too frightened to let it go.